The mountain had gone wrong. I felt it the way you feel lightning before it strikes, that electric crawl beneath the skin, the pressure drop in the air that makes your teeth ache and your pulse stutter. Something was shifting in the bones of Ashvale Ridge, and it had nothing to do with the late autumn wind tearing through the pines or the storm rolling dark and heavy over the eastern peaks. This wrongness was older than weather, deeper than season. It lived in the soil beneath my bare feet, vibrating up through the soles like a warning drum, like the mountain itself was trying to speak, and nobody was listening. But I was. I always was. That's what it means to be a Seer-Born Omega. Not a broken wolf, not a lesser creature. People who think that have never stood at the edge of knowing and felt the world unspool itself before them like thread pulled from a wound. Seer-born means you are open in ways others are not. Raw to the frequencies of the world, tuned to channels most wolves can't even find on their best days. It means the earth whispers and you hear it. It means danger casts a shadow before it arrives, and you can read that shadow like scripture. It means you feel everything, all of it. Every current of emotion rolling through the pack, every fracture forming in the foundation of things, every catastrophe building on the horizon while everyone else is staring at their boots. And right now, what I felt was this. Something is coming through these woods that we are not prepared for. I stood at the northern edge of Ashvale's training grounds where the cleared land gave way to ancient timber, my feet planted in the cold earth, letting the sensation wash through me without fighting it. My wolf, pale as ash, lean as winter, was circling inside me in tight, anxious loops, her ears flat, her hackles raised in a ridge along her spine. She'd been restless since dawn. Since before dawn, if I was honest. Since the middle of the night when I'd snapped awake from a dreamless sleep with my heart hammering and the absolute certainty that something was watching us from the dark. I'd gone to the Alpha then. Of course I had. What else do you do when you wake up knowing? And of course he hadn't listened. Alpha Dravon Holt was a product of his bloodline. 4 generations of Iron Ridge wolves bred for strength, for conquest, for the kind of dominance that didn't ask questions because questions implied doubt, and doubt implied weakness. He was not a man who entertained feelings. He entertained results, challenges, loyalty measured in sweat and scar tissue. He certainly didn't entertain his pack's Seer-Born Omega appearing at his door at 3 a.m. because the mountain felt wrong. Go back to bed, Vesper. His voice had been flat, final, laced with that particular brand of contempt, reserved for things he considered beneath his attention. Stop letting your sensitivity run wild and start learning to control it. That's an order. Sensitivity. Like it was a disease I needed to cure. I wrapped my arms around myself now, staring into the tree line, and let the familiar ache settle in. Not the ache of hurt feelings, I was long past that. But this was something older, more structural. The ache of being fundamentally alone in your understanding of the world, of standing in a burning building and shouting fire while everyone around you calmly debated whether smoke was really all that dangerous. There had to be someone, somewhere, who would hear me. My wolf lifted her head sometimes, in quiet moments, in the space between sleep and waking, and searched for something she couldn't name, a presence just beyond the reach of her senses, an absence that felt specific, like a chair left empty that had always been meant for someone. I'd stopped trying to explain it to myself. Maybe it was loneliness wearing the shape of hope. Maybe it was 24 years of being the most perceptive wolf in any room and the least believed, curdling into fantasy. Or maybe, there was a wolf somewhere in this world who would look at what I was and call it a gift instead of a problem. I didn't let myself think about that too long. It hurt in places I hadn't learned to armor yet. The sound of the main hall door slamming open snapped me back to the present. I didn't need to turn around. I knew that energy the way you know a coming storm, that particular atmospheric pressure of ego and authority and barely managed aggression rolling out ahead of a man like a bow wave. Alpha Dravon Holt moved through Ashvale Packlands like he owned every molecule of air in them. Because as far as he was concerned, he did. Pack assembly. His voice cracked across the morning like a thrown stone. 3 minutes! Everyone! I turned slowly. The training ground was already filling. Betas streaming in from the bunkhouses, the forge, the perimeter patrol posts. Ashvale was a large pack. 30 wolves, maybe more. All of them built for war in one way or another. They assembled with the efficiency of people who'd learned that hesitation in Dravon's presence had a cost. I moved to the edge of the gathering, where I always positioned myself. Near enough to hear, far enough to be easy to ignore. Dravon stood center ground, arms crossed over his broad chest, his second Cade flanking him like a shadow. The Alpha was 40 years old and looked 30, the way powerful wolves often did. Dark hair cropped close, a jaw that belonged on a sculpture, eyes the color of cold iron that swept his assembled pack with the efficiency of an inventory check. He had once been the finest Alpha Ashvale had ever produced, his grandmother had told me, back when he'd had something to protect instead of something to prove. I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. His cold eyes found mine for exactly half a second. Dismissal dressed up as acknowledgement. Then he began. We're running the Northern Reach tonight. He let that land, watched his wolves absorb it. Full pack hunt, dusk assembly, and we're pushing into the upper territory past Blackstone Creek. The wrongness in my chest detonated into something urgent. No. I knew before the word finished forming in my mind, knew it the way I knew rain from the smell of coming clouds. The Northern Reach past Blackstone Creek had been making my wolf scream for 3 weeks. There was something wrong up there. Something that had altered the behavior of every animal that wandered down from those heights, that had made the birds root around a specific cluster of old-growth timber like it carried plague, that had given me nightmares I couldn't fully remember, but woke from shaking. I opened my mouth. Alpha. The clearing went quiet in that specific way, the sudden held breath silence of a group collectively bracing for something they've seen go badly before. Dravon's gaze came back to me, flat and cold and already tired. Vesper. The Northern Reach past Blackstone Creek isn't safe. I kept my voice even. I'd learned that much. Panic made it easier for them to dismiss me. Something has changed up there in the last month. The prey animals are avoiding the upper timber. The creek birds are routing south around it. I've been feeling. You've been feeling. Cade's voice came from the right, smooth and lightly amused, the particular tone of a man who considered himself clever. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. Not unkind, most of them, just dismissive, reflexive. Like they'd agreed long ago that Vesper's feelings were a category of information that didn't apply to serious decisions. I've been sensing a genuine threat, I said, refusing to let the murmurs land. Something territorial, something that has established itself in the upper reach. And if we run a full pack hunt into that ground without scouting it first, you'll tell me there's danger lurking in the dark that only you can feel. Dravon's voice was level, but there was an edge beneath it now. The edge that came out when his authority was questioned in public. And you'll ask me to delay a hunt on the basis of anxiety dressed up as instinct. Again. It's not anxiety. My wolf pushed at me, wanting dominance, wanting teeth. I held her back. I was right about the eastern boundary last spring. I was right about the sickness in the southern. You got lucky. He said it without heat, which was somehow worse, like my accuracy was an irritating coincidence rather than evidence of anything real. Seer-Born sensitivity is useful for emotional management and pack counseling. It is not a military intelligence asset, and it is not going to dictate Ashvale's hunt schedule. don't. The word rose up in me, fierce and desperate. Don't do this, don't take them up there. Alpha, please. I stepped forward, hating that I had to. Hating that please was the only currency I had left to spend. At minimum, send scouts first. Let me come with them. If I'm wrong, we lose an afternoon. If I'm right, you're not. He turned his back, literally, physically, turned his back on me and addressed the pack. Dusk assembly, full kit. Cade, coordinate the shift groupings. He walked away. My wolf howled inside me. Not in grief. Not quite. In the cold, specific fury of someone who has been here before and knows exactly how it ends. I stood there long after the assembly broke apart, long after boots scraped on frozen ground and voices faded back into the ordinary morning noise of the compound. Long after the last beta disappeared into preparation, and I was alone at the edge of the training ground with the mountains screaming at me, and nobody left to hear it but myself. The sun climbed. The wrongness didn't leave. It deepened. By mid-afternoon, I had tried twice more, once with Cade, who listened with the expression of a man humouring a child, and once with Ferris, the oldest beta, who had the decency to look troubled before shaking his head and telling me there was nothing he could do. The hunt was decided. The Alpha had spoken. That was the architecture of this place, the load-bearing wall that nothing could move. I went back to my room in the east wing, the smallest room in the compound, the one with the window that faced the mountain. And I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, and I let myself be afraid. Not the performance of fear I showed them, the carefully managed anxiety I tried to suppress in public so they wouldn't use it against me. The real thing. The bone-deep, gut-hollowing terror of someone who can see exactly where the road ends and cannot make the people she loves change direction. Because I did love them, stupidly, stubbornly, despite everything. Kala, the youngest beta female, who sometimes left food outside my door on nights the pack ate without me. Old Ferris, who'd never laughed directly at my warnings. Even some of the others who treated me as background noise rather than active threat. They were still mine. This pack, broken and dismissive and infuriating as it was the only family I had ever had. And tonight, it was going to walk into something it wasn't ready for. The worst part wasn't the fear. The worst part was the silence inside me where certainty lived, absolute, unshakable, utterly useless certainty. I had always known what was coming, and I had simply never been able to make anyone care. Dusk fell over Ashvale Ridge like a closing eye. We shifted at the tree line, 30 wolves pouring from human form into fur and instinct with the smooth efficiency of a pack that had run together for years. My wolf emerged pale and swift, her coat the colour of wood ash in low light, her eyes the same silver grey I had in human form. She was not the largest wolf in the pack. She was not the most imposing. But she was perceptive in ways that went bone deep, and right now every sense she possessed was screaming at her to stop. I ran because I had no choice. The reach opened before us as we crested the first ridge, ancient forest stretching up toward the peaks, the pines here enormous and dark, their canopy so thick it blocked the emerging stars. The air was different up here, and colder than it should have been even for the season, with a quality I couldn't name, like the smell before lightning but without the electricity. Dense, pressurized, waiting. My wolf dropped to the back of the pack formation, her ears rotating constantly, cataloguing every sound. Which was how I noticed the silence first. No prey movement in the underbrush. No night birds, no small creatures rustling in the root systems or calling across the dark. The forest above Blackstone Creek was completely unnaturally silent, in the manner of a room where everyone stops talking the moment you walk through the door. I pushed forward, tried to draw level with Cade at the pack's flank. I couldn't speak in wolf form, but I could communicate urgency. A nudge to his shoulder, a planted stance. the universal language of distress that any wolf should recognize. Cade glanced at me, flicked his ears in dismissal, and kept running. The creek crossing came and went beneath us, the water shockingly cold even through my pores, and then we were in the upper timber. The trees here were ancient, older than the pack, older than any living wolf's memory of this territory. Their trunks were massive, their roots surfacing from the earth like the knuckles of buried giants. The shadows between them were absolute, impenetrable, and they were wrong. Thick with a quality that went beyond darkness, like something was using the dark as cover, like the dark itself was watching. My wolf's hackles rose in a solid ridge from the back of her skull to her tail, every single hair. "Turn back," she begged me. "Turn back, turn back. Turn back." Dravon gave the signal. The pack spread into hunting formation around a deer trail, fresh and crossing the clearing at the far edge. My wolf planted her feet, her whole body rigid with refusal, and I stood frozen at the outer edge of the formation while the others fanned out with disciplined efficiency, their attention locked forward on the promise of prey. None of them felt it. The trail was wrong. The deer's passage was too recent, the scent too sharp, almost deliberate. Like it had been laid. Like something that understood how wolves hunted had created it specifically to pull us into position. I tried one last time, a sharp bark, both ears pinned, body low, every submission signal stripped away and replaced with pure alarm. Stop, look, listen. Dravon's black wolf turned and pinned me with a flat, furious stare. "You stay in position." And then he lunged forward after the trail, and the pack followed, and I was 30 wolves running headlong into a trap and utterly powerless to stop it. It came from 3 directions simultaneously, from the high ground of the rocky shelf above us, from the timber on both eastern and western flanks. Movement that was not prey, movement that was deliberate and massive and utterly silent until it wasn't. Until the moment the trap closed and the night erupted around us. My wolf had half a second of absolute certainty before the challengers broke from the tree line, and in that half second I did the only thing I could do. I screamed. Not in fear, in warning. The alarm howl tore out of me, pitched high and carrying, the ancient signal that every wolf understands in blood and bone regardless of pack or territory. It bought us perhaps 4 seconds of preparation instead of 0. It wasn't enough, but it was something. What followed was chaos given shape, not slaughter. They weren't trying to kill us. That was the first thing I understood, even in the confusion and the noise and the terrifying press of bodies larger than any wolf I'd encountered. They were driving us. 3 coordinated waves working in perfect silence, blocking escape routes with geometric precision, channeling us relentlessly downhill, pushing us back across the creek and away from the upper timber. There was intelligence behind it, strategy, the kind that came from centuries of understanding how a pack moves and how to redirect it. Dravon fought. His betas fought. I saw Cade take a hit that sent him spinning, recover, plant his feet and fight back. I saw 2 of our younger wolves separated briefly from the group and felt my heart stop before they were driven back to the pack rather than isolated. They weren't separating us, they were herding us, keeping us together and moving us out. I ran the outer edge of our retreat, smaller than the others, faster, working to keep the panicked younger wolves from being cut off or overwhelmed. 3 times I put myself between a flanking drive and a packmate who hadn't seen it coming. 3 times I deflected enough pressure to keep them in the group. My ribs took a hit from a shoulder check that wasn't gentle. My left foreleg screamed where something clipped it during a close pass. I kept running. We stumbled back across the creek and out of the upper timber, and the pursuing wolves simply stopped. Right at the boundary of the old growth. Perfectly, completely still, watching us go. Not triumphant, not aggressive. Patient, in the way that very old things are patient, with the absolute confidence of creatures that know they have all the time in the world. We regrouped on the lower ground, 30 wolves breathing hard in the sudden quiet, and I lifted my head and looked back into the darkness of the upper reach and saw him, just for a moment, just long enough. Between two enormous pines, where the shadows were thickest, something stood that was not a shadow. Enormous, still, dark-coated in a brown so deep it read as black, and holding itself with a quality of presence that had nothing to do with size and everything to do with age and absolute unhurried authority. His eyes caught the thin moonlight and held it. Gold, burning and ancient and fixed directly on me with a focus so specific, so complete that everything else, the sounds of my packmates catching their breath, the creak behind us, the cold, the pain in my ribs, fell away. There was only that gaze, that impossible, weighted, world-narrowing gaze. My wolf went completely still, not frozen by fear. Still. The way a compass needle is still when it locks to north. Every anxious, circling, screaming impulse in her simply stopped. And in the silence that replaced it, she made a sound I had never heard from her before. Low and wondering and absolutely certain. "Oh," she breathed. "There you are." He held my gaze for 3 heartbeats that felt like years. Then he stepped back into the shadows and was gone, and the mountain was just a mountain again, and I was standing in the dark with blood on my flank, and the strangest feeling I had ever experienced, settling into my chest like something coming home. Dravon's furious howl split the night from 10 feet away. I jerked back to myself, back to the pack, back to the reality of 30 wolves who had just been humiliated on a hunt I had spent all day trying to prevent. We ran for Ashvale's compound, and I ran last, and I kept looking back over my shoulder at the darkness where those gold eyes had been. My wolf kept pulling toward it. The wrongness that had saturated the upper reach all day was gone, replaced by something I couldn't name. Something that felt less like threat and more like a tide I was suddenly swimming against in the wrong direction. "Go back," she whispered. I forced her forward. Dravon called the post hunter counting in the main hall, and I made the mistake of speaking. Not the mistake of speaking exactly. I knew what I was walking into. I'd done the calculation, weighed the cost, and spoken anyway because silence felt like complicity, and I have never been able to manage complicity, not even when it would have saved me considerable pain. He needed to know what I'd seen. They all needed to know. "I saw someone watching us," I said, cutting across Dravon's account of the retreat, before the attack was fully engaged. A wolf, enormous dark coat, gold eyes, old scarring. He was positioned at the upper timber boundary. He was watching me specifically. Well, not the pack, not the retreat. Me. The hall went the specific quiet of a group deciding collectively how to respond. Dravon's iron eyes came to mine slowly. "Watching you." He was separate from the wolves that drove us. Observing, like he was your contact. Breck's voice cut across mine. Dravon's most senior beta, built like a wall with a wall's subtlety. He leaned back in his chair and let the implication hang in the air between us, poisoning it. Funny timing, wouldn't you say? You spend all day warning us off that territory. We get ambushed the moment we enter it, and you spotted a mysterious watcher who was looking straight at you. He spread his hands, almost like you knew it was coming. I did know it was coming. The words came out harder than I intended. I told every single one of you it was coming. That's what I've been trying to... She's been agitating against that territory for 3 weeks. Cade said, his voice carefully neutral, which was more dangerous than open hostility because it sounded reasonable. Every patrol briefing, every planning session, she wanted us afraid of that ground. He paused. Now I'm wondering why. The accusations were building the way avalanches build, each one small, each one adding weight to the one before it, the whole mass gathering momentum towards something that would be impossible to outrun. I looked around the hall and saw it happening in real time on face after face, not malice in most of them, just the easier path, the simpler narrative, the one that didn't require them to admit they'd been wrong. "I'm trying to protect you," I said, and hated how the words sounded. I hated that I had to say them at all, that 24 years of demonstrated loyalty to this pack had not yet purchased me the basic credibility of being believed when I raised an alarm. "All of you. That's all I have ever been doing." "Then you should have told us about your contact sooner." Dravon's voice came from the head of the table, and it was the quiet voice, the truly dangerous one. Not the bark he used in assemblies, or the cold dismissal he used on things he considered beneath notice. This was something different, low and deliberate and already decided. "You should have come to me the moment you established communication with wolves operating in our territory. I didn't get her out." He said it to Breck without looking at me again, like I'd already ceased to exist. Like the conversation was over and the verdict was rendered, and there was nothing left to do but implement it. "I'm done hearing her." Breck moved fast. His hand on my arm was not gentle, and I pulled back on instinct, which was apparently the wrong response because his grip became a shove, and then I was at the door and then I was through it. And the cold of the night hit me like a wall. I caught myself on the doorframe, turned, opened my mouth to say something, I don't know what, something that would reach them through whatever had closed over them like a lid over a jar. And Breck's fist connected with the side of my face. The world tilted. I went down. My wolf screamed. My human mind registered the sounds. The door still open, the hall visible, Dravon visible inside it at the head of his table, and watching with that same flat expression. And understood with the distant clarity of someone in shock that he was not going to intervene. He had decided I was the problem. In the economy of his pride, watching me be beaten was cheaper than admitting he'd been wrong. 2 betas came through the door. They were not quick about it. I had been hurt before. Omegas in packs like Ashvale accumulate damage the way rivers accumulate sediment, gradually, constantly, through the ordinary operation of a system that was never designed with your comfort in mind. I knew how to take a blow, how to minimize damage through positioning, how to protect what mattered most, how to wait it out. What I had not learned to do was stop talking, even then. Even on the frozen ground with my cheek pressed into the dirt and the taste of blood flooding my mouth, and some stubborn, stupid, irreducible part of me was still trying to make them understand. "Something is out there," I managed, the words wet and broken. "Something old. You need to prepare. You need to—" A boot caught my ribs and the words dissolved into pure sensation, white and consuming. I curled around the pain, breathed through it, waited for it to crest and recede the way pain always does, if you give it enough time and don't panic. "Enough." Dravon's voice from the doorway finally. Not horrified. Not guilty, tired, like I had inconvenienced him by needing to be stopped. "She's made her point." They left me there. The door closed. I lay on my back in the dirt and looked at the sky and breathed. Stars were emerging between the clouds, hard and cold and impossibly distant. And I tracked them the way my grandmother had taught me. Find the fixed ones first, the ones that don't move, and use them to locate yourself. She'd meant it as navigation advice. It worked for other kinds of lost as well. I knew exactly where I was. I was at the end of something. I had known, in the abstract way you know things before they've finished happening, that this was where it would eventually arrive. That loyalty without reciprocity was a road with only one destination. That I had been giving this pack everything I had for 24 years, and what I had gotten in return was tolerance on good days, and this on the bad ones. The mountain was screaming again. Not in warning this time. Something different. The wrongness from the upper reach was moving. I felt it the way you feel weather moving, that pressure shift, and that change in the quality of the air. Something was coming down from the high ground, something large and purposeful and absolutely furious in the specific way that things with very old power are furious. Not hot, not chaotic, but cold and vast and completely inexorable. They'd felt what had been done to me. I didn't understand how I knew that. I just knew it the way I knew everything. In my bones, in my wolf, in whatever channel between myself and the world stayed open regardless of whether I wanted it to. The upper reach was awake, and it was not pleased. I managed to roll onto my back. The effort cost me, ribs burning, face throbbing, the cold of the ground seeping through my clothes in a way that was going to become dangerous if I stayed here long enough. I stared at the stars and breathed and felt the mountain's fury building at the tree line like a tide coming in. Don't, I thought, at whatever was out there. Don't start a war for me. I'm not worth a war. But even as I thought it, my wolf lifted her head from wherever she'd retreated inside me during the beating, shook herself, and fixed her attention on the tree line with an expression I recognized. He's here. And then I saw them. They materialized from the darkness the way mist comes, gradually then all at once until suddenly the entire perimeter of Ashvale's compound was lined with wolves standing in perfect, breathtaking stillness. 50 of them at minimum. Their coats ranged from silver to black. Their sizes varied, but every single one of them radiated the same quality. Real power, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Say, they stood like they'd been planted there, like they were part of the landscape, and at the front, directly between me and the packhouse door, stood the dark wolf from the upper reach. He was even larger than the glimpse had suggested. His coat caught what little moonlight filtered through the clouds and gave back nothing, just depth, a darkness with texture and weight. The scars I'd seen at a distance were stark, up close, deep furrows running down the left side of his face and continuing down his neck, giving him the look of something that had been to the edges of survival and returned fundamentally altered. One eye was damaged, clouded, the light in it diffuse and unfocused, the other burned gold. That eye was fixed on the packhouse door with the patience of something that has waited before and will wait as long as it takes. My wolf made that sound again, the low, wondering, certain sound. She was pulling at me despite my injuries, despite the blood drying on my face and the fire in my ribs, trying to get me upright, trying to close the distance between us and the dark wolf at the perimeter. I know, I told her, I know, but not yet. The packhouse door burst open. Dravon came out first, shifted, flanked by his beaters, all of them ready for a fight, their wolves high and aggressive and preparing for whatever rogue pack had dared approach Ashvale's borders. I watched from the ground as Dravon assessed the perimeter and saw the exact moment comprehension landed, the slight falter in his stride, the fractional repositioning of his weight, every dominant instinct in his body recalibrating in the face of something that outranked it by a margin he hadn't previously considered possible. 50 wolves. Perfectly still, perfectly silent. Dravon was Alpha. Alphas don't back down. He stepped forward and projected dominance with everything he had. The 50 wolves didn't move, didn't even acknowledge that he'd moved. It was like watching someone shout into a void. Then the dark wolf shifted. One moment wolf, the next man. The transition so fluid and fast, it seemed to bypass the intermediate steps entirely. Physics cooperating with something that clearly had a long-established relationship with it. He stood in the cold without apparent awareness of temperature, and I understood looking at him that certain things simply didn't apply to him the way they applied to everyone else. Temperature, time, the ordinary constraints of creatures who had not been alive long enough to renegotiate them. He was built like something that had never needed to be anything other than exactly what it was. broad through the shoulders, heavily scarred, the damage continuing across his chest in patterns that told stories I couldn't yet read. His hair was dark, long enough to move in the wind that had picked up around the compound with his arrival. His face, even marked, even asymmetrical from healed violence, was the kind of face that stopped the ordinary function of thought, sharp, deep-set, framed by those scars into something that looked less like beauty and more like truth. Unignorable, undeniable. His gold eye found Dravon. "I'm Raziel Voss." His voice rolled out across the compound with the ease of something that had never once doubted its right to fill space, deep and resonant, and carrying a quality that made the air itself seem to pay attention. "Alpha of Northhold, and you?" The gold gaze swept the assembled betas, the packhouse windows where faces pressed against glass. All of it will be very still. No one moved. Not one wolf. "You entered my territory tonight." His attention settled back on Dravon, and I watched Dravon's wolf fight the urge to look away from that gaze and lose. "You hunted my ground. You endangered your pack by ignoring every warning the earth gave you, and every warning the one among you wise enough to hear it gave you as well." Something shifted in his expression, a darkening. And then, his voice went very quiet, and the quiet was the most dangerous thing I had yet heard. "When she came back to you, when she stood in front of you and told you what she'd seen and asked you once more to listen, you let your wolves beat her, and you watched." The silence that followed had weight, had temperature. Dravon's wolf was crouching now, not quite submitted, his pride still fighting, but the posture had changed. The aggression had drained. What was left underneath it was something raw, something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "She's my pack's Omega. What happens within my borders is my—" "She tried to save your lives." Raziel moved. One step, just one, and every beta behind Dravon flinched. "She tried 3 weeks ago and you dismissed her. She tried this morning and you ordered her to be silent. She tried tonight, during the hunt itself, and you ignored her. And when she came home and told you what she'd seen in those woods, a piece of intelligence that could have prepared you for what's coming next, you had her beaten." His jaw was a hard line. "So don't speak to me about borders. Don't speak to me about pack business. You have forfeited any claim to my professional respect." Dravon's chin came up, the last reflex of a man who has run out of ground to give but can't yet bring himself to stop. "You can't just walk onto claimed territory and—" "And what?" Raziel's voice dropped lower still, and something shifted in the atmosphere of the compound. The 50 wolves on the perimeter moved, not aggressively, just a half step forward in perfect unison, and the sound of it, 50 paws pressing into frozen earth simultaneously, was quietly devastating. "And what, Dravenholt? Tell me what it is you think I cannot do. Enumerate my limitations. I'm genuinely interested." Dravon's wolf submitted, not the ceremonial submission of a formal challenge, where you chose your moment and performed it with some remnant of dignity and tact. The real kind. The involuntary kind, where your body makes the calculation faster than your pride can intervene, and you find yourself throat-bared before you've decided to be. He went down on one knee in the snow, and every beta behind him rippled through degrees of the same thing, a wave of collapsing resistance moving backward through the group. Raziel watched it happen without satisfaction, without cruelty, with the flat acknowledgement of someone confirming what they already knew. Then, his gold eye moved to me. The world shrank. He crossed the compound in long, unhurried strides, past Dravon, past the betas, past all of it as though it had already been resolved, and now there was only the thing that actually mattered. He crouched at my side in the dirt, and this close I could see the gold of his eye had amber in it, warm and ancient, and I could feel the heat radiating off him despite the cold, and my wolf was making that sound again, helpless and certain and full of something I didn't yet have words for. "Can you move?" he asked, and his voice was entirely different from the one he'd used with Dravon. Private, careful, like something he was offering rather than projecting. "Yes." My own voice came out rough, blood-thickened. "I think." "You don't have to." He held completely still, not reaching for me, not taking. Just present a point of warmth and steadiness in the chaos, letting me decide whether to lean into it. "Tell me what you need." I looked past him at Dravon, still on one knee in the snow, at the betas with their lowered heads, at the pack house where I had spent my entire life feeling like a translation error, like the universe had put me in the wrong story and no one had the authority to fix it. "I need them to understand," I said quietly, "what they almost walked into, what they'll walk into again if they don't change. Then they'll be taught." He stood, and the authority came back like a coat he'd set aside and picked up again, settling over him with complete naturalness. He turned to face Dravon, who was still down, and when he spoke, the words had the weight of stones placed deliberately, one after another. "Your leadership ends tonight." "You can't." Breck started forward, and one of Raziel's wolves, a lean grey female with intelligent, completely unimpressed eyes, stepped into his path without growling, without showing teeth. She simply looked at him, and Breck stopped moving so abruptly his boots scraped on the frozen ground. "Your leadership ends tonight," Raziel repeated, as though no one had spoken. "Not your life. She has asked for restraint, and I will honor that, because her judgment has already proven sharper than yours by a considerable margin. But your authority over these wolves is forfeit." He moved to stand directly before Dravon, close enough that the Alpha had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact, and even then, the gold gaze was something to endure rather than meet. "You ignored instinct in favor of pride. You punished truth because it threatened your comfort. You led 30 wolves into marked territory on a bad hunt and then blamed the one among you who had tried to prevent it every step of the way." He paused, and the pause was precise. Not hesitation, punctuation. These are not the actions of a leader. They are the actions of a frightened man wearing authority he never fully earned. Dravon made a sound, low and broken and complicated, protest and submission tangled together into something that had no clean name. "Here is my judgment." Raziel's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "You will step down. You will submit to a council of your senior betas until someone capable of genuine leadership emerges from this pack. You will spend your days learning what it means to serve rather than rule, which is something you should have understood before you took the title. And you will live every remaining day of your life knowing that the Omega you dismissed and discarded is the reason you still have a life to live. Because she asked me not to end you. And I listened to her. He let that land. You should have done the same. Dravon's head bowed, not gradually. All at once, like something that had been held up by a single support, finally giving way. Raziel turned to the betas. All of them. His gold gaze moving across the gathered wolves with the methodical thoroughness of inventory. Not threatening, just seeing, which was somehow more effective. If any wolf in this pack raises a hand to an Omega again, he said, for any reason, or under any justification, I will hear of it, and I will return. And there will be no counsel, no step down, no measured consequence. I am old enough that my patience has a flaw, and you have come closer to it tonight than is comfortable. He let the silence breathe for a moment. Am I understood? The response was immediate and total. Submission rippling through 30 wolves like a current through water. Whimpers and bared throats and bodies going low in the frozen dirt. Even Marcus, who I'd watched calculate his way through every social situation in this pack for years, dropped to his belly without hesitation. Only then did Raziel's wolves relax, some shifting to human form with the casual ease of a group comfortable in their power, unconcerned with cold or nakedness, or talking to each other in low voices with the settled energy of people who had done this before and knew how it ended. Raziel came back to me. "Was that too much?" he asked, quiet enough for only me. And the question was genuine, not performative deference, not the kind of check-in that already knows the answer. He was actually asking. I considered Dravon, still on his knee in the snow, the betas shaken and subdued, the pack that had beaten me, now in the dirt because of the judgment of the same wolf they'd beaten. "No," I said. It was exactly enough. Something eased in his expression, the specific release of tension that comes when two people discover, in some new situation, that they are aligned. He extended his hand, open, waiting. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." I took his hand. He didn't take me far. Just to the tree line's edge, where the compound's lights gave way to forest darkness, and the mountain rose enormous above us, its peaks catching the first thin light of rising stars. Two of his wolves followed at distance, the grey female and a massive black male, giving us the particular privacy of guards who know how to be invisible. The snow had stopped, the sky was clearing, and Ashvale behind us was silent, in a way it hadn't been all day, all week, the specific silence of a pressure finally released. "You were right," Raziel said, "about all of it." "I know." The words came out without bitterness, just fact. "I always am." He looked at me for a moment, and in the darkness I could read the quality of that attention even without seeing his face clearly. The density of it, the focus, like being in the beam of something that genuinely wanted to understand. "How long?" "Since I was 12. I hugged my arms around myself, the cold finally reaching me now that the adrenaline was draining. The first time I knew something before it happened and tried to tell someone. They laughed. I paused. "They've been laughing for 12 years. They're not laughing now." "No." I looked back at the compound, at the subdued pack, the lowered heads, the hollow where Dravon's authority had been. "They're not." "Come to Northhold." His voice was direct. Not commanding. It would have been easier if it were commanding, easier to push back against. Instead, it was simply honest, which was much harder to deflect. "You have given this pack everything you had, your warnings, your loyalty, or your forgiveness tonight when you had every right to withhold it. You owe them nothing more." His hand came up and this time it didn't hover. His fingers settled carefully against my jaw, avoiding the bruising, just the lightest point of contact. "Come to a place that will value what you are. Come to wolves who will listen when you speak, not because they're told to, but because they've learned that the cost of not listening is too high." "I don't know you," I said. "No." Simple acknowledgement. "But your wolf does." He wasn't wrong. My wolf was pressed against the boundary of my skin, reaching toward him with an urgency that had nothing to do with the mate bond's pull and everything to do with recognition. The bone-deep, cellular, primal recognition of something that has been missing and is suddenly, inexplicably present. "What if I'm not what you expect?" I asked. "I expect a wolf who has been right about everything for 12 years and survived being ignored about all of it." His thumb moved barely against my jaw. "Whatever else you are will be a discovery. I find I'm looking forward to it. That's a lot of confidence in someone you've watched from a distance." "I have very good instincts." The corners of his damaged eye creased slightly, and someone once told me the cost of ignoring them. Despite everything, the blood drying on my face, the ache in my ribs, the entire wreckage of a night that had taken apart a life I'd spent 2 decades building. I laughed. It came out rough and surprised and completely genuine. He watched me laugh with an expression I couldn't fully read in the darkness. Something open and careful and large. "I'll come with you," I said. His whole body went still. "I'm terrified," I added, because honesty felt important here at this particular edge between one life and whatever came next. "I don't know your territory or your pack or what any of this means past tonight, but I know that staying here would finish something in me that's already barely intact. And I know," I held his gaze, "that when I look at you, I feel more seen than I have felt in 24 years of existing. So yes, I'll come." The smile that crossed his face was rare in the way that very precious things are rare. Unhurried, reaching his eye and staying there. "Then let's go home," he said. He lifted me when my legs failed on the 2nd mile, simply scooped me against his chest without ceremony, one arm under my knees and one at my back, and carried me through the dark while his pack moved around us and the mountain breathed its slow, settling breath above. I was unconscious before we crossed the ridge. I woke to sunlight. Not the grey, apologetic light that came through my basement window at Ashvale, filtered through grime and cut short by the angle of the eaves. Real sunlight, broad and generous, lying in warm bars across firs that smelled of pine resin and cedar and something distinctly, specifically pack, the layered scent of wolves who had slept safely in this place across generations. I lay in it for a long time before I did anything else, just breathed. Let it be real. The knock at the door was polite, measured, as if the person on the other side had specifically calculated a knock that communicated respect rather than demand. "It's Petra," a female voice said. I have food, and I have answers, in whatever order works for you. No obligation to either. I can leave everything outside if you'd prefer." I stared at the ceiling. "In whatever order works for you." Like my preference was a variable worth accounting for. Like what I wanted mattered in the calculation. "Come in," I said. The woman who entered was perhaps 40 in human appearance, though the quality of her stillness suggested the calculation was more complex than that. Silver hair, cut short, sharp features arranged into an expression that was neither warm nor cold, but something more useful, attentive. She carried a tray that smelled like everything my body was currently demanding, and she set it down with the efficiency of someone who had done this before, then settled into the chair by the window as though it had been waiting for her. "And he carried you the whole way," she said without preamble. 12 miles. Wouldn't let anyone else." Tavian offered twice. She picked up a cup of something steaming. "He hasn't slept." I began to eat. My body moved faster than my manners. "He didn't need to." "He needed to." She said it simply, not as correction, but as clarification. Understanding what Raziel needs versus what Raziel says he needs is a significant part of how this pack functions. Her eyes were steady over the rim of her cup. "He would have said he was fine setting you down. He would have been wrong. How long have you known him?" 70 years, approximately. Casual the way you'd say about a decade. He brought me here when my birth pack collapsed. I was the 3rd wolf he collected. There are over 40 of us now. She paused. This is what he does. He finds wolves the world has discarded and builds something with them. Has been doing it for longer than most packs have had names. How old is he? He stopped tracking it accurately sometime in the 14th century. She said it without emphasis, letting the number do its own work. First blood, original line. There are perhaps 8 wolves left in the world who go back to the true beginning of pack structure, before the territories were divided, before the hierarchies were formalized, before most of the traditions your old pack treated as ancient were even invented. She set down her cup. He is older than the rules, which means the rules have never entirely known what to do with him. I absorbed that, tried to reconcile it with the wolf who had crouched in the dirt beside me and asked what I needed. So he asked my permission, I said, for everything, even carrying me. Yes. Something shifted in Petra's expression. Not quite a smile. He would. Why? She looked at me for a moment with the particular attention of someone deciding how honest to be. Then, because he has watched, across centuries, what happens when powerful things take without asking. He has seen it in other alphas. He has felt the pull of it in himself. And he has spent a very long time making deliberate daily choices about who he wants to be. She stood. He's an ancient predator who has chosen, consciously and repeatedly, to be something better than his instincts would default to. That requires constant work. You'll see it if you watch him. She moved to the door. He'd like to see you when you're ready. He's in the upper meadow. Oh, and Vesper. She paused at the threshold. He's been up there since dawn, just so you have the full picture. She left. I sat with the sunlight and the food and the information she'd left behind, turning it over. An ancient alpha who chose patience, who built refugees for broken wolves, who had felt my pain across a mountain range and come to do something about it, and then crouched in the dirt beside me and waited for my answer. My wolf pressed against the inside of my ribs, not urgently, just a steady, warm pressure. Go find him. I went to find him. The upper meadow earned its name, a natural plateau in the tree line where the land leveled before rising again toward the peaks, open to the sky in a way that felt deliberate, like the mountain had cleared this particular space for the specific purpose of having somewhere to think. The view was the whole valley at once, the compound below, the river catching morning light, the mountains enormous and white-capped beyond. Raziel stood at the plateau's edge with his back to me, and I recognized the quality of his stillness now. Not peace, but its disciplined cousin, something actively maintained against a pull in the opposite direction. He turned before I was close enough that most wolves would have heard me. You climbed, he said. My ribs are functional. I stopped a few feet away. I wanted to see you, without blood in my mouth and the ground tilting. He turned to face me fully, and in the morning light his scars were more visible than they'd been in the dark. A landscape of old damage, deep and fully healed, the history of violence that had tried to end him and failed. His damaged eye caught the light differently than the gold one, diffuse where the other was focused, and both of them were fixed on me with an attention that I was beginning to understand was simply how he looked at things he considered worth his time. Petra talked, he said. Petra gave me context. Petra has strong opinions about what constitutes necessary information. But there was no real edge to it. More like the particular resignation of someone who has long since accepted a truth about someone they value. She told me how old you are. Approximately. She told me you built this place from wolves nobody wanted. That's one way to describe it. He turned slightly, looking out over the valley below. Another is that I found wolves who were exactly what they needed to be in a context that couldn't recognize it. And I gave them a context that could. Like me, I thought. Out loud I said, "Is that what you're doing with me?" He looked back at me, and the gold eye was very direct. I'm doing with you whatever you'll let me do. Nothing more. I stepped closer. The morning air between us felt different from ordinary air, charged in a way I'd have diagnosed as weather instinct if I hadn't known better. My wolf recognized you. In the upper reach, when our eyes met. She made a sound I'd never heard from her before. I watched his face. Has that happened to you? Recognizing someone? Once? The word was careful. Tonight was the first time in my life that it happened. The mate bond. Yes. I let that sit between us, neither of us rushing it. A bird moved in long circles over the valley below. The river glittered. Somewhere in the compound, smoke was rising from a cook fire. I'm afraid, I said. not as confession, as information, something I was offering rather than performing. Not of you, of what this means, of how large it is, of being someone's everything, when I've spent my whole life being someone's inconvenience. I know, his voice was very quiet, and I'm not going to tell you the fear is unreasonable because it isn't. What I'll tell you instead is this. He moved closer, the last foot of distance between us closing until I could feel the warmth of him clearly against the mountain cold. I have walked this earth for a very long time. I have seen countless things come and go. Packs rise and collapse, territories shift, the whole architecture of the world rearrange itself across centuries. And in all of it, I have never... He stopped, jaw working. I thought this had simply passed me by, that there was something in my particular nature that made it unavailable. I had made my peace with that. His gold eye held mine. And then you howled a warning into the dark on behalf of wolves who had spent years teaching you that your voice didn't matter. And something in me, he shook his head slightly, woke up. My throat was tight. Walk with me, I said, every day for a while. Not as Alpha and rescued Omega, just as whatever we are. Let me know you while I figure out what this is. The smile was devastating again, rare and complete and landing in my chest like something taking root. I would like nothing more, he said. He offered his hand. I took it and didn't let go. The walks became the rhythm everything else organized around. Dawn usually when the valley was still soft with mist and the world felt new and unwitnessed. He showed me the territory in layers, the obvious geography first, then the history underneath it, then the living present of a pack that had been built with intention rather than inheritance. I learned that Northhold's wolves didn't follow Raziel out of hierarchy. They followed him because they'd each at some point been exactly where I'd been, at the end of something, running out of road, and he had shown up. He had offered not rescue but recognition. The understanding that what they were was not a problem to be managed, but a capacity to be developed, given the right ground. I learned that Petra had been the strategic mind of 3 separate pack collapses before she found Northhold and decided she was done watching good structures fail for preventable reasons. That Tavian, the massive black wolf who shadowed Raziel at Borders, had been cast out of his birth pack for refusing a command he considered wrong and had spent 2 years as a lone wolf before Raziel found him. That the grey female, whose name was Sienna, had the sharpest tactical mind in the pack and had been dismissed from her own pack's war council because her alpha at the time didn't believe female wolves belonged in planning rooms. They were all, in one form or another, one versions of the same story. Wolves who had been right about things in the wrong place. You built a pack out of people who see clearly, I said one morning on the rocky ridge above the river bend. That's not an accident. Raziel considered that. It may have been instinct more than intention, initially. He was quiet a moment. I have always been drawn to the ones who know things, the ones who feel the world accurately and get punished for the accuracy. He looked at me sideways. I understand that particular dynamic, having knowledge that others can't use or won't use, seeing what's coming and being unable to make anyone care. You've experienced that? For centuries, not with self-pity, just fact. Being first blood means I carry memories and instincts the younger packs have lost, are things they once knew and no longer believe because the generation that taught them is gone. I have walked into situations knowing exactly what was going to happen and been ignored every time because the wolves I was trying to warn had decided that age was not the same as wisdom. What did you do? Built something where it was. He looked out over the valley. Created a place where knowing was valued, where instinct was treated as data rather than noise. His jaw tightened slightly. And where Omegas sit on councils instead of being beaten for using their gifts. The word landed quietly, deliberate. Petra told me, I said, that Omegas used to be advisors, that it was only rewritten by Alphas who found it inconvenient, direct and unapologetic. Power rewrites its own history. The version of pack structure your old pack operated under is 300 years old at most, and it was designed specifically to concentrate authority in the Alpha rather than distribute it through the pack's natural sensing network, which is what Omegas are. His voice hardened. Dravon didn't dismiss you because your gifts were weak. He dismissed you because your gifts, properly valued, would have challenged his authority. It's easier to call sensitivity weakness than to admit that someone with less formal power is seeing more clearly than you. I sat with that for a long time. Below us, the pack moved through morning training, wolves sparring in both forms, the movements precise and mutually respectful, no unnecessary cruelty, no dominance games. Just skill being honed in a space where the goal was collective strength rather than individual hierarchy. I've been waiting for you to push, I said finally, for the conversation about the bond, about what happens next. I know. He didn't look at me. I've been waiting for you to be ready to have it. What if I told you I'm afraid I'll never feel ready? That the mate bond and the recognition and all of it is real and present and I feel it constantly. And I'm still terrified to move toward it because every time in my life that I've trusted something certain, something has found a way to take it from me. He turned then, and his full attention came to rest on me with a weight and a warmth I was only beginning to be able to hold without flinching. Then I would tell you, he said carefully, that you don't need to feel ready. You need to feel safe enough to choose, and if you're not there yet, I will wait. I have an abundance of time, and you are worth every moment of it. You haven't claimed me, I said. You've had the opportunity. The bond is clearly there. You haven't moved toward it. Because I need you to want me. The words were simple and absolute. Not the bond, not the biology, not the pull of recognition that bypasses choice. Me, Raziel Voss, inconvenient and ancient and occasionally terrifying, with all the history and damage and deliberate restraint that entails. His scarred hand came up and hovered near my face, and I recognized the gesture now. The same one he'd made in the dirt outside Ashvale's compound. The offer, not the taking. I will not be something that happened to you. I will be something you chose. I reached up and closed the distance he left open, pressing my hand over his and holding it against my jaw. I choose you, I said. I'm not waiting for ready. Ready is a story I'd tell myself forever to avoid being afraid. I choose you now while I'm afraid, because the alternative is losing this through cowardice, and I've never been a coward. I felt his hand tremble slightly beneath mine. Just once, just barely, the involuntary response of something holding itself tightly that has been waiting a very long time to let go. I choose you. Claim me. Let me claim you back. Let us build something that doesn't require either of us to keep waiting. He closed his eye. When he opened it, the gold was very bright. You're certain. I have been right about everything for 12 years, I said. I'm right about this. His cabin was built into a natural rock formation at the eastern edge of the compound, one wall stone, seamlessly integrated into the living mountain. The rest constructed with the same philosophy as the rest of Northhold, working with the landscape rather than imposing on it. A fire burned in the hearth. Bookshelves reached the ceiling. The furs on the floor were thick and warm, and the room smelled like him. Pine and wood smoke and something deeper, older, that my wolf recognized and settled into like a sound she'd been straining to hear finally becoming audible. He faced me across the firelight, and the patience in him was wound so tight it had become its own kind of tension. Not control for its own sake, but the last restraint of something enormous being held at the very end of its tether. I know you, I said. Not all of you. I know there are centuries I haven't touched yet, but I know who you are in the parts that matter right now. You're someone who built a refuge and called it a home, who carries the capacity for devastating violence and uses it only in service of protection, who has spent 6 weeks asking my permission for every step when he could have simply taken what the bond was offering. I moved toward him. I know that you felt my pain from across a mountain and came for me. I know that you crouched in the dirt beside me and waited for my answer. I know that every single day since, you have given me space and time and freedom and asked for nothing in return except my honest company. I stopped in front of him, close enough to feel the heat of him against the fire's warmth. I know you, enough to choose you. He closed the distance. The claiming when it came was both more and less than I'd imagined. Less ceremonial, no performance, no ritual. Just the two of us by the fire and the bond that had been pulling at both of us since the moment our eyes met in the dark of the upper reach finally completing its circuit. The bite was sharp and certain and flooded the connection with something so large I had to close my eyes to hold it. His love, ancient and careful and fierce, his relief, his protectiveness, and underneath all of it the quiet, steady joy of something long lost finally found. I bit him back. I felt his shock through the bond before I felt it in the sound he made. Surprise and pleasure and absolute, overwhelming joy, the circuit completing in both directions simultaneously, the bond snapping fully into place like a key turning in a lock that had been waiting for it since before I was born. Mine, he said against my skin. Yours, I agreed. And you're mine. Make sure you remember that. His laugh was rare and genuine and warmed the room more than the fire. I'll remember, he said, for the rest of my very long life. 3 months later, I stood at a forest edge, but this one was Northold's, familiar now, known the way you know a place that has decided to keep you. The pack moved around me in the easy rhythms of a morning well started, wolves heading to training, to patrol, to the forge and the kitchen and the 100 small maintenances of a community built to last. Petra had put me on the pack council 2 weeks after I arrived, which had caused approximately 48 hours of murmuring from the older wolves before Raziel made a single observation in the main hall, and the murmuring stopped. Sienna had started including me in border assessments, noting with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone who had been waiting for this resource to become available that my range was 3 times what any other wolf in the pack could manage. Tavian still didn't say much to me directly, but he'd started positioning himself on my side of any room we shared, which Petra told me was as close to an endorsement as he gave anyone. I was learning what it felt like to be useful, not tolerated, not managed, useful. My specific capacities applied to actual problems and generating actual results. My warnings acted on, rather than filed under Vesper's anxiety and left to expire. Last week, I had felt a storm building 3 ridges east and told Raziel it would hit harder than the weather patterns suggested. He'd moved the exposed shelters to higher ground before the day was out. The storm had been savage. We'd lost nothing. He'd told the pack in the morning assembly afterward exactly whose warning had saved them, named me directly, made it a matter of record. I had stood in the back of the hall with my face burning and my wolf making the singing sound she saved for moments of profound rightness, and I had understood something I'd been slowly learning since I arrived. Being valued was going to take more getting used to than being dismissed had. Dismissal was a familiar country. This was new territory, and new territory required navigation. But I was a Seer-Born Omega. Navigation was what I did. A Raziel's hands settled on my shoulders from behind. The greeting of someone who has learned your particular language of comfort, warm and grounding and present. "What do you feel?" he asked. I let my senses extend, unhurried, reaching along the channels I'd spent 24 years trying to suppress, and the last 3 months learning to use. The mountain breathed around us, slow and settled. The forest was alive and unhurried, no wrongness in its frequencies, no pressure drop warning of approaching threat. The river caught early light and scattered it. The pack behind us hummed with the specific warmth of a group that trusted its ground. "Peace," I said. His hands tightened slightly. "Anything else?" I extended further, let my wolf reach out along the southern approach across the lower valley, toward the passes that connected Northhold's territory to the broader range beyond. Something moved there. Large. Purposeful. Moving with the unhurried certainty of something that knew exactly where it was going. "Something's coming," I said. Raziel went still behind me. "Not threat," I added quickly, passing what I was feeling. "Not danger, not exactly, but not neutral either. Something." I frowned at the southern peaks, trying to refine the impression. "Something with very old blood, moving this way from the south." I turned to look at him. Something I haven't felt before. A presence I can't categorize. I watched his face. "You know what that is?" It wasn't a question. His expression had gone complex in a way I was still learning to decode, not worried exactly. Something more layered, something that had history in it, deep and unresolved. "Yes," he said, very carefully. "I think I might." "Who is it?" He held my gaze for a long moment, and in his gold eye I read something that made my wolf sit up straight, a quality of weight, of significance, of doors long closed becoming relevant again in ways that had not been anticipated. "Someone who is going to complicate everything we've built here," he said slowly. His hands tightened on my shoulders, not painfully, but with the involuntary grip of someone who has just seen something they'd hoped to avoid walking toward them anyway. "Someone I've been expecting for years. Someone I'd hoped might choose differently," he exhaled. "Someone I haven't spoken to in a very long time." "Raziel," I put my hand over his. "Who?" The howl split the morning from the southern tree line, single, sustained, in carrying the specific resonance of blood, so old it had its own frequency, its own particular signature that I had never encountered before because there was nothing in my experience to compare it to. It rolled across the valley and up the slope, and hit the compound like weather. Not violent, just enormous. Impossible to not feel, impossible to misread. I am here. I am coming. Come out and face me. A challenge. Unmistakable. Raziel went rigid behind me, and for the first time in 3 months, the first time since I'd known him, I felt fear move through the mate bond from his side of it, not for himself. Something more complicated than personal fear, something that tasted like old grief and older obligation. "Kyle," he said. The name landed like a stone dropped from height, sinking through still water. My brother." I stared at the southern tree line where the howl was still fading into the mountain silence. "You never told me you had a brother." "No," Raziel agreed, his voice very quiet, very still. The stillness of someone standing on ground they'd hoped never to stand on again. "I didn't." The howl came again, closer, and the mountain, which had been breathing peacefully around us all morning, went taut. Thank you for listening to another emotionally gripping, world-shifting shifter romance here on Moonmarked. If this story reached you, if you felt Vesper's knowing, or the weight of every dismissed warning, or the moment Raziel crouched in the dirt beside her and waited, then you already know why we come back here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Because Raziel Voss is at the southern border. He's been running for a very long time, and whatever he's running from just caught up with all of them. See you in the next chapter.